Hey everyone, welcome back to MangaMinute. I'm thrilled to share my latest recap video with you. If you missed the previous one, no worries, just take a quick peek in the description below for the link. Now, let's dive right in and enjoy.
Eunho set out on the escort mission to the shaman faction, following his father's command. Beside him, Li Riang accompanied the journey with an air of boundless enthusiasm. The young man's eyes sparkled with excitement, his energy almost palpable as they made their way toward the fabled domain. For Li Riang, the shaman faction represented the pinnacle of Taoist aspiration, a revered sanctuary that every practitioner of the Tao sought to visit at least once in their lifetime. The prospect of setting foot in such a place filled him with an uncontainable eagerness. He spoke fervently of the shaman faction's grandeur, a place often lauded as heaven on earth, where the air itself was said to hum with the presence of prospective immortals. Eunho, however, met Li Riang's exuberance with indifference. To him, the idea of the shaman faction being a divine haven was laughable, nothing more than an overglorified hideout for those who fancied themselves superior. The admiration that others held for the shaman faction stirred nothing but disdain within him. While Li Riang dreamed of celestial enlightenment, Eunho saw only pretense and hollow sanctity. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, darkened further as his thoughts drifted back to the past. The very notion of immortals brought a bitter taste to his mouth, a sharp reminder of why he harbored such contempt for them. To Eunho, the shaman faction's allure was a facade, a shallow promise that hid the truth of those who clung to it. The journey stretched on, Li Riang's chatter filling the air, but Eunho remained ensnared in his own memories, silently reaffirming his loathing for what lay ahead. In his past life as a yokai, Eunho had once walked the immortal realm, a place where his power and authority over the spirit world were both revered and ridiculed. Among those who resided in that lofty domain, the Taoist immortals often displayed a condescending demeanor, veiling their contempt behind seemingly benign words. Eunho vividly remembered one such encounter. A Taoist immortal had sneered at him, his words dripping with mockery. The immortal had spoken of Eunho's prowess with thinly veiled scorn, reducing the great fox who commanded the spirit world to nothing more than a servant performing the dirty work of heaven. The jibe was sharp, suggesting that Eunho's many tales were better suited for sweeping than the noble acts he had undertaken. The immortal's laughter had echoed through the realm, a grating sound that grated against Eunho's pride and authority. That moment, etched deeply into his memory, had left a mark on Eunho's soul. Even now, as he journeyed toward the shaman faction, the bitterness resurfaced, twisting his expression into one of cold disdain. The immortals in heaven had always reveled in their invulnerability, looking down upon beings like Eunho with their haughty eyes. To them, he had been nothing more than a tool, a means to an end in their pursuit of maintaining the celestial order. Li Riang's excitement was impossible to contain. As they continued their journey toward the shaman faction, his voice frequently rang out, filled with eager anticipation for what lay ahead. Every so often, he would burst into exuberant exclamations, the words spilling forth with the fervor of someone about to fulfill a long-cherished dream. For him, this journey was more than just an escort mission. It was a rare opportunity to witness the splendor of a place he had always revered. Eunho, however, found Li Riang's enthusiasm grating. The constant chatter and outbursts threatened to fray his patience. With each excited shout from Li Riang, Eunho's irritation deepened. He contemplated silencing him, even imagining tying him up and leaving him in the carriage if it meant a moment of peace. Yet, despite Eunho's pointed warnings, Li Riang remained unfazed, his mood unbroken by any hint of disapproval. He simply brushed off Eunho's ire with a carefree spirit, seemingly willing to endure any discomfort for the sake of his enthusiasm. And so their journey continued. The road to the shaman faction stretched before them, largely uneventful save for the endless stream of Li Riang's exuberant commentary. He bragged about the legends of the shaman faction, relishing each tale as if it were a personal achievement. While Eunho focused on the path ahead, his mind occasionally wandered back to the memories that had tainted his view of Taoist sanctuaries like the one they were approaching. As the journey wore on, Li Riang eventually succumbed to exhaustion, his earlier excitement giving way to a deep, undisturbed sleep. Eunho glanced at him, the corners of his lips twitching into a faint expression of amusement. The sight of Li Riang, now peaceful and unguarded, was almost laughable. Despite the chaos he had stirred throughout the journey, He was now utterly oblivious to his surroundings. Eunho murmured to himself, recalling how Li Riang had once wavered, throwing talismans at him in a fit of panic. Yet, all of that seemed forgotten, replaced by the young man's relentless enthusiasm for the shaman faction. Eunho couldn't help but find it somewhat amusing, a small reprieve from his usual irritation. However, the tranquility of the moment was short-lived. As the carriage rolled deeper into the woods, Eunho's senses sharpened. A presence made itself known, faint at first but growing increasingly distinct. It wasn't just a single individual. There was a group, lurking within the shadows of the dense forest. Eunho's eyes narrowed, his demeanor shifting instantly from relaxed observation to alert readiness. Initially, he had dismissed the presence of 3 or 4 people, mere stragglers whose intentions did not concern him. But now, the numbers had swelled to around 25. This was no coincidence. He called for Warrior Jang, who responded promptly, his tone respectful and steady. Eunho informed him of the situation, his words concise and deliberate. Beyond the trees there were watchers, an entire group shadowing their movements. Warrior Jang listened carefully, his eyes scanning the forest as Eunho spoke. Without hesitation, Jang identified the threat. The Aso group, known associates of the notorious 10-bandit skill group, from the forest. Eunho's eyes flickered with intrigue at the mention of the Aso group. He had heard of them before, a band of individuals who often preyed upon travelers through these woods. Warrior Jang continued, explaining that the World Manor had already paid the necessary toll to pass through their territory. The bandits, recognizing the banner they carried, would have no reason to interfere. Their presence was simply a formality, a watchful escort rather than an impending ambush. Eunho's eyes narrowed as the carriage came to a sudden halt. Up ahead, a figure loomed in the middle of the road, wielding a massive axe that glinted menacingly in the filtered sunlight. The man's posture was deliberate, leaving no doubt that his presence was meant to intimidate. Eunho immediately sensed the shift in the air. This was no mere observation by the Aso group. His instincts proved correct as he observed Warrior Jang's reaction. Taken aback, Jang instinctively ordered the carriage to stop, his voice carrying a sharp edge of urgency. "Wait here," Jang urged, addressing Eunho with a mix of deference and concern. With that, he dismounted and approached the man blocking their path, his movements cautious yet authoritative. He confronted the axe-wielding figure, identifying their group as the Aso group and reminding him of the toll already paid by Chanhejang. His voice was firm, demanding an explanation for this brazen obstruction. It was clear that Warrior Jang expected compliance. After all, the toll arrangement had been settled. The man, however, remained unfazed. He drove his axe into the ground with a dull thud, his expression betraying no hint of fear or deference. His response was curt and unapologetic, claiming that the toll had increased since their initial payment. Warrior Jang's eyes widened in disbelief. An increase in tolls? This was unexpected and, more importantly, a blatant violation of their prior agreement. From the sidelines, the rest of the Aso group bandits watched the exchange with grim amusement. Their lips curled into smirks as they subtly began to encircle the carriages, their movements like predators closing in on prey. It was clear this had been their plan all along, an ambush disguised as a mere toll negotiation. The mood shifted rapidly from tense uncertainty to imminent conflict. Sensing the danger, Eunho's escort group wasted no time. With practiced precision, they quickly formed a defensive formation around the carriages, weapons drawn and eyes scanning the surroundings for any sudden movements. They were prepared for this confrontation, recognizing the threat for what it truly was, a band of marauders testing their resolve. Warrior Jang's expression hardened as he confronted the man blocking their path. His voice was stern, brimming with authority and disbelief. This supposed increase in the toll was news to him, and he made it clear that no such information had reached his ears. The man's demand was audacious, a transparent attempt to extort more money from the travelers. However, the man met Warrior Jang's words with a mocking smirk, his tone laced with derision. He taunted the Chanhejang group, remarking on their apparent wealth. To him, it seemed a simple matter. They had the funds so they could pay now and sort out the details later. His words dripped with insolence, making it clear that this was nothing more than a brazen shakedown. Amid the tension, Li Riang jolted awake, his eyes wide with confusion as he took in the scene unfolding before them. He quickly turned to Eunho, his voice rising with anxiety as he sought an explanation for the commotion. The sudden shift from sleep to potential danger had disoriented him, and he looked to Eunho for clarity. Eunho, however, remained composed, his gaze fixed on the unfolding standoff. He responded to Li Riang with a calm detachment, outlining the situation in an almost casual tone, as if the bandits' demands were a minor annoyance rather than a serious threat. The idea that these thieves had dared to demand money from Chanhajang in the first place was, to Eunho, an absurdity. Now, their greed had escalated to outright obstruction, blocking the road for an even greater sum. His disdain for the situation was evident, but it was tempered by an underlying sense of amusement at the bandits' audacity. Warrior Jang quickly assessed the situation, realizing the bandits' true intent. To him, it was clear they were attempting to extort more money, likely to fund their vices such as alcohol. He approached Eunho with a suggestion, proposing a simple solution to defuse the situation. His idea was to pay the bandits a small sum and have them clear the road, a pragmatic approach meant to avoid unnecessary conflict. However, Eunho's reaction was immediate and fiery. The very notion of conceding to these demands disgusted him. The thought of handing over more money after they had already paid the initial toll was intolerable. His eyes flashed with anger and defiance, a desire not just to refuse the bandits but to reclaim what had already been taken. Warrior Jang, sensing the rising tension in Eunho's demeanor, quickly tried to intervene. He stressed the importance of Eunho's safety, urging him to consider the broader picture. They could settle the matter once their journey was complete and they were back within the secure walls of Chanhajang. But a different idea struck Eunho. His expression shifted as he considered a new approach. Calmly, he instructed Warrior Jang to give him enough money to satisfy the bandits' demands, a request that momentarily caught Jang off guard. Nevertheless, he complied, handing over a money pouch containing 150 yuan, careful to leave out the funds allocated for travel expenses. Eunho then made his intentions clear. He would stay behind to deal with the bandits personally, instructing the rest of the group to continue their journey without him. Warrior Jang was taken aback, his eyes widening in alarm at the suggestion. This was not what he had intended when he spoke of prioritizing Eunho's safety. But before he could protest further, Eunho cut him off with a quiet assurance. His voice was calm, almost dismissive of the potential danger. After all, what harm could these bandits do to him, the Lord of Chanhajang? Standing before the bandit leader, Eunho faced him with unwavering confidence. He showed the pouch of coins toward the man, his voice carrying authority and disdain as he announced the amount. 150 niang, a sum meant to show that Chanhajang was not to be trifled with, even in a matter as trivial as this. The leader of the Aso group saw the pouch, a glint of greed flashing in his eyes. He hadn't expected such a generous payment. For a moment, he was struck by the thought that Chanhajang was indeed different from other merchants they had extorted before. But his excitement quickly turned into mocking arrogance. While the sum was substantial, it was clear he intended to milk the situation for all it was worth. He sneered at Eunho, hinting that the payment would suffice as the extra toll they demanded. But just barely. The implication hung in the air that they could always demand more if they wished. Eunho, however, remained calm, his gaze piercing as he demanded that the road be cleared first. The carriages were to proceed, unhindered, with the rest of the escort. He left no room for argument. Reluctantly, the bandit leader relented, pulling his axe from the ground and motioning for his men to step aside. The path opened, and he signaled that the carriages could pass. It was a hollow gesture of compliance, filled with the unspoken threat that they could easily change their minds. Eunho turned to the escort group, instructing them to move forward. Warrior Jang hesitated for a moment, casting a worried glance at Eunho, but nodded in acknowledgement. With a sharp command, he urged the carriages forward. The convoy continued its journey toward the shaman faction, the wheels creaking and groaning as they rolled over the now unblocked road. The escort guards followed, their eyes lingering briefly on Eunho as they passed, the unease of leaving him alone palpable among them. Yet, Eunho stood firm, watching as the last of the carriages disappeared into the distance. He remained behind with the bandits, a solitary figure against the forest backdrop. The bandit leader stepped forward, a greedy gleam in his eyes as he stared down Eunho. His voice was filled with anticipation and arrogance as he declared that with the carriages gone, it was now Eunho's turn to pay up. His words dripped with confidence, a sneering assurance that Eunho had no choice in the matter. Under his breath, he mused over the spoils, calculating how much alcohol they could buy with the 150 niang. The prospect brought a wicked grin to his face, and his men erupted into laughter, their excitement palpable as they anticipated an easy victory. Eunho, however, remained unfazed. His expression darkened, a grim smirk playing on his lips as he regarded the bandit leader with cold eyes. His voice cut through the bandits' laughter like a blade, dismissing their demands outright. The money was his, belonging to Chanhajang, and it was meant for their expenses. The implication was clear. He had no intention of handing it over to these petty thieves. The bandits' amusement faltered, their laughter dying down as they realized Eunho's words were not a mere bluff. There was a calm resolve in his demeanor, an unmistakable warning that they had underestimated him.